Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday, little BookTube ceremony that a few channels do where we read poetry and talk about it on Thursdays. I am making a big melodrama out of Poetry Thursday, as I do about everything. I'm reading my way through this book. One book, 20th century American poetry, which ordinarily in the course of something called Poetry Thursday, I would otherwise have completely avoided. Not this book, but this subject matter, 20th century American poetry. But instead, we're giving it a try. We're going through it together. Now, one of the problems with an anthology like this, we have 3 different editors here. One of the problems with an anthology like this is that you're always going to be dealing with some of the personal choices of the editors, especially the closer you get to the present day, when it's possible that the poet in question was the mentor of your thesis director, or maybe your thesis director, or lived in the building with you, or something that intersects with living memory and can skew editorial judgment. Also, a side note about personal favorites. That's true with any anthology. If you have multiple editors, you can sometimes have an editor indulge in a personal favorite. A poet whose work doesn't really merit inclusion in a book like this. Sometimes those things are flagged all over. Sometimes they are the soul and essence of the thing. The Quiller Couch Oxford Book of English Verse, for instance, pays very little attention to historical imperatives as what belongs in such a volume. Instead, it's just his favorite. Same thing with the Golden Treasury. These editors largely avoid that, but not today. Not today. Today we are dealing with a poet called JV Cunningham, who is minor. Probably doesn't deserve page after page after page in this book. I have no idea what the reason for that would be, but I guarantee you it's not just a cold assessment of the poetical record. And Cunningham is referred to, probably, I guess, correctly, as more of a formalist, more of a classicist when it comes to verse. How he broke with the growing trends of his day, of his flourishing years, when it comes to poetry. And you might think that would please me, but actually it just shows how far the terms are debasing, because he can be called these things when, if he's doing formal or more reserved or more traditional poetry, he's doing it at a level that more formal and more reserved and more traditional poets of a century before would have considered promising for a grade school student. It shows that the times are shifting, and he rather ostentatiously did not shift with them. I have a feeling that led to a small, very small cult of personality that may be the reason that he's in here. But I want to read you a couple of his poems. There's a real long poem that's in here that we're obviously not going to read, but let's read a poem of his from 1960 called "To My Wife," and then we'll read another one. This is "To My Wife." And does the heart grow cold? You know, in the indiscriminate green of summer or in earliest snow, a landscape is another scene, inchoate and anonymous, and every rock and bush and drift, as our affection alters us, will alter with the season's shift. You aren't mishearing. That is rhyming anonymous with alter us. So love by love we come at last, as through the exclusions of a rhyme, or the exactions of a past, to the simplicity of time, the antiquity of grace, where yet we live in terror and delight, with love as quiet as regret, and love like anger in the night. Okay, all right. So it's a short verse. It's what would, I'm sure, would have insulted Cunningham to be called a ditty, but it does kind of redeem itself in that last stanza. That last stanza is fairly good. It adamantly is not even a baseball throw near great, but it is fairly good. It should not be in this volume, but this poet should not be in this volume. And we'll just finish up with another one of his. This is on Dr. Drink. A reader, did he buy it, borrow, beg, or read it in a bookstore on one leg, dislikes my book, calls it, to his discredit, a book you can't put down before you've read it. Yet in this paucity, this drought of phrases, there are as many as in children's phases. The trivial, vulgar, and exalted jostle each other in a way to make the apostle of culture and right feeling shudder faintly. It is a shudder that affects the saintly. It is a shudder by which I am faulted, like the trivial, vulgar, and exalted. The I don't think I need to say much about a poem like this. Did you beg, borrow, or steal something? Is a hundreds of years old English language idiom. It's not you being clever with language. It's and so on. I know that this isn't true because JV Cunningham had no sense of humor at all. He was surgically without a sense of humor. But if I didn't know that about him, I would assume that these things are horrible on purpose. Anonymous on Alter Us. I would assume these things were were horrible on purpose. That this was a send-up of the type of traditional poetry that the editors are unironically accrediting to this figure. But I know it's not that. No, I know it's not that. Instead, we could, if we were being fatalistic, say that it is one of the last flickers on the rock before the light goes out forever. But we aren't being fatalistic, so we won't say that. Instead, we'll move on. There are probably 100 more poets in this book. There are only 2 or 3 of them who are worth reading in any way. We're coming up on one of those in a bit, but not next Thursday. So we'll wrap this up for now, and we'll see what misadventures, because it's misadventures almost exclusively from here on out, we encounter next time. This is Poetry Thursday fun. I'll wrap this up. I'll see you next week. Thank you, BookTube.